going through Mark. I'm not sure how much. I might take a little break here from Mark because we've been doing Mark for a while, right? And you're like, dude, and it hasn't been just like a little while. We've been doing Mark the entire summer, even a little bit in the spring, and I'm in chapter 6, right? That tells you where we're at. So you're like, man, Dustin, what in the world? Pick it up a little bit, right? And so I might get through 5 or 6 verses today as we kind of go through this. But I think it's important that we study this stuff and not just like blow over it, right? Because it's important that we go through and we study the whole counsel of Scripture, all of it, right? So today we're going to be in Mark chapter 6. We'll dive into that and we'll see how that goes. Now, up till now, actually what's happened up till now is we've seen a whole lot of miracles and stuff that Jesus has done. Jesus has healed people that had sickness. We had some people who he's done other miracles. He calmed a major storm, like a hurricane, it seemed like, out on the sea. He's done some exorcisms, which that's a little bit creepy, right? So he's done that. Well, we've seen all these, and the big question I think that we sometimes have to ask is, are these miracles that he's doing the direct result of the faith of the people that are receiving those healings or those miracles, right? The reason why I bring this up and I want us to address this is because there are people, a lot of them are on TV. You'll go on TV and you'll watch, and they're going to make this promise to you, okay? I want you to understand the promise. The promise is this, that if you have enough faith, okay, if you muster up enough faith, then what you pray for, you will get, okay? And so they'll come up with ways to help you exercise that faith for your own good, right? So that you'll get what you need. So you're at home and you're depressed because you've got this financial problem and you're having trouble getting a job and you're struggling. And so the guy on TV tells you, he says, you can have what you want, you can have it all. You just need to have faith. And you're like, well, I do have faith. No, you don't have faith. You need to exercise that faith. And the way you exercise that faith is you give some money to our ministry. And if you give money to our ministry, that's an exercising of the faith. And then you will receive because God has to give to you. Okay? You ever hear that theology? They say, why didn't you get healed? I'm sick. I'm hurting. I'm struggling. And I've got cancer, and and I've tried everything. Why have you not been healed? They say, well, the problem is that you have not exercised faith. If you had faith, God would have to heal you because faith causes healing. All right, so I want to explain to you how that theology works, okay? And this is a theological term. It's called, that is theologically what we discussed, seminary, other places, that's called bull crap. Okay? Just want to help you understand the theological term for that. It doesn't make any, as a matter of fact, it's anti-faith. It's anti-faith because what you're doing is you are now saying that I am in control of the situation. I'm in control. The reason why, if I muster up enough faith, God don't even have a choice on it. I have to muster the faith up, and I get it, and now I'm in control because I can cause myself to be healed because I have enough faith. That's baloney. That's baloney. Who would want to worship a God like that is a slave to you? Who would want to worship a God who really wants God? Who wants to be dictating to God what's going to happen? Half the things I've prayed, at least half, probably over half the things that I've prayed for in my life are things that I should never have prayed for. Things that I didn't want, right? You're in high school, right? And there's that boy that's at school and you're like, God, I pray that you just make him like me, right? It's a really good thing that God didn't make that kid like you, right? You look back now and you're like, oh, God, if you just make this girl love me, oh, God, it would be great. And you're like, now you're like, you go back and you're on Facebook and you're like, oh, God, praise God. Man, you're a good God. Oh, God, God, I give you all the glory. I give you all the glory for this. I'm going to scroll right past that. Swipe right, swipe left. I don't want anything to do with that. So some people in the Bible, though, that what we've done, we've seen all these miracles and these things. Some of the people did have active faith, right? They did have active faith. There's the woman that had the flow of blood, right? And she came up and she kind of secretly came up behind, and she's going all stealth, and she gets up behind Jesus. She wants to steal this blessing without Jesus knowing, right? So, oh, Jesus won't know. And all of a sudden she's healed, and then she's trying to, whoa, 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 hold the phone. Hold the phone. Somebody touched me, right? Somebody healed me. And she's like, oh, crud, now I'm in trouble, right? But she exercised active faith, okay? She actually was a part of that, her faith, and Jesus will say, your faith has made you well, right? So your faith was a part of it. What does it mean that your faith made you well? What it means is that you had enough faith that you came to Jesus, right? If she didn't have any faith, she wouldn't have come, right? She came because she believed there was the possibility. Believing that God could do something, that's faith, right? There are other people where we have miracles that we see here, and there is no faith involved at all. Like we look at the guys that are out in the middle of the lake, right? And all of a sudden a storm comes up, and Jesus is in the back snoozing. And all the storm comes. Do they exercise faith? No, they exercise lack of faith by saying, Jesus, don't you care that we're going to die? And Jesus is like, man, you guys don't have no faith. He comes right out and says, you don't got no faith, right? Have a little bit of faith here in me. And so what we're seeing is that there's not really this connection, this direct connection between God working and moving because of faith, right? Sometimes people have faith, sometimes they don't, but they come to Jesus. But we've seen all these people. We saw the woman. Let's just go through some of them that we had. We had the woman. We had the guy that was possessed by a demon. He was on the other side by thousands of demons, right? He was possessed, and that happened. He didn't have any kind of faith, right? Because he couldn't even think right. He couldn't think in a straight line. The guy's running around naked in a cave. That's not good. So he's not making decisions like, oh, I think I'll have faith. That's not happening. We're not having that with a woman. We've got the guy that was healed earlier. He was at the synagogue, and he was healed here. Just different things. And the question is, I just want you to tell you, all these people that experienced these miracles did all have one thing in common. I've been looking at it, and I come to this passage today, and I go, they all had one thing in common. Every one of them had one thing in common. They didn't know Jesus before he was 30 and a rabbi. None of these people that get healed, none of these people that are on the boat, none of these people that are possessed by demons and all this, none of them knew Jesus until he was 30. None of them did. Right? There's not any of these kids, any of these guys that were healed and this miracle happened to them and said, oh, you know what, I remember Jesus in the second grade, right? We used to color together. I remember Jesus and I, we used to hang on the playground. Or, my parents and Jesus' parents, they were good buddies, and they used to hang out at bowling night. I remember buying some furniture when Jesus was about 25. I remember buying like a couch from him, and boy, it was really well done. Nobody has that experience with Jesus that's healed. None of them knew him back then. None of them went to Jesus' 15th birthday party right at the lake where they were all swimming. None of that ever happened. None of them knew Jesus. They all met Jesus as a miracle worker later with no prior experience to Jesus. Okay? And the reason that's important is because your past with Jesus affects you. Your past with Jesus affects you. Your past with people affects how you trust them or what you think of them. So here a few weeks ago, you may recall that I had a family reunion. And this whole side was full of like 22 people that knew me as Dusty. Right? They all knew me as Dusty. Not a single one of them calls me Reverend. Now, my mom don't call me Reverend. She's like, I wiped your butt. I ain't calling you Reverend. Right? They don't. I remember when you were in high school. I remember when you snuck off. I remember when you did this. I remember, you coming in late after curfew. I remember all that stuff. I'm not calling you Reverend, right? My cousins who I played with when you're, they're not calling me reverend. Right? I'm still dusty. I'm still dusty. And I'll always be dusty. And so the pattern for what happened here with Jesus when he picked up and left, okay? He grows up, he lives in Nazareth. His family's a Nazarene family. And then all of a sudden they go to Bethlehem and Jesus is born. After a while they have to escape, and they're on the lam for a while because there's a king that wants to kill Jesus. And an angel says, hey, go. But he comes back, and now from, I don't know, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, all the way up till 29, he lives in this town of Nazareth that's about 150 to 200 people. Do people know people in towns that are that small? Like, do you kind of know what's going on with other people if your town is small? Maybe a little bit? Yeah? So, like, if somebody on a town is, does anything, like breathes, you probably know it on the other side of town if your town is less than 250 people. And so everybody knows Jesus. Anything that he did, any experience he had, if he tried something, if he sold to somebody and they didn't like the furniture he made or whatever, it all happened when he was, before that. They all had their experiences with Jesus. And then out of nowhere, and Jesus is known probably as a pretty decent guy. He's known as being in town an illegitimate child. And so there's a little bit of scorn. We'll see that here in a second when we look at the Bible. Like, you know what? His own dad said that he's not the dad, right? And so we don't really know who's, we're not quite sure who, something's up there. So I don't know how we're going to play this, but he grew up and everybody just kind of accepted everything. And now he's 29, and we don't know what happens at 29, right? At 29, all of a sudden he leaves. Now, I don't know if he leaves and immediately goes to the Jordan, and he immediately goes there and he's baptized by John the Baptist, or if there's a little bit of time that passes where he goes and he travels around a little bit and he's kind of staying incognito. We don't really know. There's no real... But all of a sudden, at 29, Jesus just picks up and leaves. Did they have a party for him? Did they say, hey, Jesus, you're going out? Did he announce his plans? I'm going out and I'm going to start a new enterprise. I'm going to do something great. Did they all know that? Did they plan a party for him, a going away party? Did they do any of that? We don't know what happened. All we know is that Jesus leaves. The next thing we see is Jesus is at the Jordan with John the Baptist, and John the Baptist has been telling people this guy's going to show up. He baptizes him. He gets up out of the water. The Holy Spirit comes down. Jesus then immediately goes and he fasts for 40 days out in the desert. He goes for 40 days by himself. Okay? Just him. He fasts for 40 days. As soon as those 40 days are done, he's tempted by the devil. And then we find out in Luke chapter 4 that he leaves that place, goes into Galilee, and heads right back to Nazareth. He goes back home immediately. Not a lot of other stuff happened. He just goes back home. When he left, he was a carpenter. He shows up, it's less than a year later. Less than a year later, he shows up in chapter 4 of the book of Luke, and when he shows up, everybody's like, holy cow, what happened to Jesus? All of a sudden, Jesus is a rabbi. He went from being a carpenter like 8 months ago to now he's a rabbi, and he stands up in the middle of church and he preaches this message that basically says about the Messiah, and what you've heard is a fulfillment. I am the Messiah. And they look at him and they're like, you got to be kidding me. And so they drive him out to the edge of Nazareth to a cliff to kill him, right? Let's just toss him because we don't need any need for Jesus. And so they're going to toss him off the cliff. And when they get ready to toss him off the cliff, Jesus somehow just walks through the crowd. I don't know what that's about. Somehow he just escapes, right? Because he's just like, I don't know, incredible. And so he leaves, and he does some ministry for a while. He does some healings we see in the book of Mark. He goes and goes to the other side. He calms a storm. There's a lot of things that happen. But Jesus... Now, here's the thing. if you in Atkinson try to kill me, okay, I'm not coming back. Probably, right? Chances are I'm like, you know what? I gave him a chance, right? I gave him a shot. But, I'm thinking I'm good, right? I'm thinking I'm good. Not Jesus. It's not Jesus. Jesus, he says, you know what? Even though they've rejected me, even though they want to kill me, this is still my hometown. Billy, who I played baseball with when I was younger, who I colored with. We were in Mrs. Thompson's class, and we used to, I know. He gives second chances. Isn't that great? Jesus gives us second chances, right? He says, even though when I came, you didn't want me, I'm going to come back. And he comes back at Mark chapter 6. Here's what it says. Let's look at Mark 6, verse 1. When Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. So that's different too, right? Because now he comes back a second time, and it's not just him. Now he's got disciples, right? He's got a school with him. He's a traveling school. And he shows up into town, and they're like, oh, he's back. Oh, my goodness, he's got disciples. And the word's crying around. Accompanied by the disciples, when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. You're like, good, all right. Things are going good. He comes, he goes into the temple, into the synagogue, he starts to preach, and people are amazed. That's what you want, right? You want Jesus amazed. Don't get too excited. Where did this man get these things? They start asking questions. They're asking all kinds of questions. Where did he get these things? What things? Well, first of all, where did he get disciples, for crying out loud? The guy's walking around with disciples. Who's got disciples? We just saw him like less than a year ago, and now he's back in town. Little Jesus. Remember little Jesus? I remember little Jesus, man. Sometimes, I don't know, he'd be kind of squirrely, that little Jesus. I remember. Now he's got disciples? Come on, Jesus. What's wrong with you? Where did this man get these things? They asked. What's the wisdom that's been given him? It's like all of a sudden he left and he wasn't given all these wise things before. Now all of a sudden he comes back. It's been a year and he's like wiser than everybody in town. He's not speaking like other people in the synagogue where they're quoting other people like an attorney, right? He comes in and he talks like it's right from himself, which it is. They're like, holy cow, who is this guy? What is going on? Something is a tad askew. What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? Are they saying that he hasn't performed miracles? No, they know he's doing miracles too. They don't doubt he's doing miracles. They're just like, what in the world is this with all these miracles? Now it gets personal. Isn't this the carpenter? Listen, we know who he is. Like, I already know who Jesus is. He's a carpenter. Right? I bought my last bedroom set from him. Right? He made my kitchen table. Did a good job, by the way. Yeah. But still, carpenters don't have disciples. Isn't this a carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Now it's a dig. Nobody calls anybody by the name of their mom. They always call him by the dad. Right? Even if your dad's gone, even if your dad's passed away, you're still the son of so-and-so, not with Jesus. Hey, isn't this the illegitimate kid? Isn't this the kid whose dad's not really his dad? Isn't that who this is? He can't have disciples. He can't be a rabbi. He can't be doing miracles. Something's wrong. We know this guy. Aren't his sisters here with us? Like his family lives in town here. And all of a sudden he comes back, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to call him rabbi, right? We're not calling him reverend. We're going to call him Dusty, right? He doesn't get any kind of special anything because we know him. We're familiar with him. And it says, and they took offense at him. They were offended. Offended. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor, except, there's one exception to prophets not being honored. And that's when they go home, except in his hometown, among his relatives in his own home. And then it says this, and this is a scary statement. It says he could not do any miracles there except lay his hand on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. There's very few times where is it even possible? I didn't even know it was possible for God to be amazed. Do you know that that was possible? When God says, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. You got to be kidding me. God is amazed. And he's amazed. He's only amazed twice in the Bible. There's another time where there's a centurion who he needs somebody to be healed, but he says, you don't even have to come to my house. Just say the word. I trust that you be. And Jesus is amazed by his faith. And this is the other time when he's amazed. He's amazed at how little they could believe, how they don't believe here. And so I've thought through this a lot, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? Is it possible for us to, as people, to amaze God with our lack of faith? Is it possible for us, out of our familiarity, what is going on here and is there something that's reproducible that somehow we could fall into the trap that Nazareth has, where God can't supernaturally work in our midst? See, that's the part that gets me. Because God, it says he couldn't do miracles. He did a couple miracles, but he couldn't hardly do it. He said he couldn't do hardly. Look at it. Look what it says. It says he could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people. Is it possible for us to be in a place or to be in a church or be in a country or be in a land that God is unable to bless and God is unable to heal and God is unable to work in your life because of the attitude or because of the heart of the people that are there? This is a regional issue, and the reason he's not doing miracles is specifically because of these people that are in that town. Right? Isn't it? It's not because he's choosing not to. He can't do it because, now you say, well, wait a second. Are you saying that he couldn't do something? I'm going to explain this here to you in a minute. All right? I'm going to explain this to you in a minute. But I'm going to lay out a few things for you right off the bat to help us. They wouldn't listen to Jesus and hear, and the reason they wouldn't listen to Jesus, it's the same reason why a lot of family won't listen to me, right? It's because they're leaning on their own understanding of who Jesus is. Okay? They won't listen to Jesus or hear him because they are leaning on their own understanding of who they believe he is from 30 years of experience. Okay? They've got 30 years with him, and so they're going to lean not on faith, not on something new that God is saying about himself, but they're going to rely on their own understanding of Jesus. I already know it. You know how many times I've heard that even here? People say, well, I don't need to go to church because I already know it. Huh? It's like, what? What? Really? Really? Well, I already understand all that. There's nothing new you can tell me. Really? Really? Right? There's nothing new that Jesus can tell these people because they already know him. They've got 30 years of experience with him. Don't do that. It says in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Where we end up having troubles and having faith and God not working is that we're not coming to him for answers because we're just leaning on what we know. We're leaning on what we've experienced, and we're like, I'm good. I'm good. And I'm comfortable in my own knowledge of everything. And I don't really want to know anything else, because anything else is going to disrupt this. I don't want to get smarter. I don't want to get wiser. I don't want any of this. And you don't say that out loud, but it's what you mean when you say, I'm just going to lean on my own understanding. Don't challenge me with something that's new that could take me out. And that's what you have to do to grow. Let me throw something up here as far as growth is concerned. Growth means recognizing that there is room to grow and that what I believe now may be incorrect. Well, I can't be incorrect. I'm obviously right about everything that I say. Well, then you'll never grow. Because if you can't acknowledge that you might be believing something now that isn't actually true, then you'll never listen to anything else because you're convinced everybody else is wrong. So I'm only going to listen to ideas and views that are exactly what I think, and I'm going to just stop everything else because I don't want to listen to anybody else, right? And what we find is the reason these people aren't experiencing any miracles in their town because their view of Jesus is incorrect. Their view of Jesus is not correct. They've got 30 years of experience that have built this up and said, we know who you are, Jesus. And the whole town, God won't work because they're so prideful and believe so much in that they're like, we don't want to hear it, Jesus. And so they're going to die believing a lie about Jesus. They're going to die not believing the truth about Jesus. They're going to die not experiencing the blessings of Jesus because they are too stubborn to say that I could be wrong about him. Maybe there's something more about Jesus. Maybe there's something more. The key word there is humility, right? The key word is humility. And it says here that they're offended. They're offended by him. Anybody in our country ever get offended? No, we don't have any offended people here, right? You guys aren't offended yet, are you? People get offended. Why do people get offended, right? They get offended because they're being told that they're wrong by the reality that's in front of them. The reality that's right in front of them, they look at it and it says, this says something different what I believe. I'm offended by that. And if I can be offended by that, I'll push that off. Now you can't get to me, right? I'll just put up an offense. That's why the word fence is in it, right? I'm going to put up an offense so that now I know that I'm right and you're wrong, but what you're saying, it offends me. Oh, I'm so offended by that. Offended, right? Here's the problem with being offended. If you're always offended, you can't grow. People that are offended constantly, which is a lot of people these days, they're not open to truth. They're not open to hear the truth. Why are they not open to hear truth? Because they're offended. And because they're offended, they say, well, I don't want to hear it because I know I'm right. I know I'm right. And I know that I couldn't possibly be wrong because that's how perfect I am. And because I'm so much smarter than you, and I'm so much holier than you, and I'm so much better than you, that I'm right. And so what you're saying to me, it's just offensive. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm just going to ignore it, keep it far away, because I don't want to hear it. And my answer to that is you're wrong. And don't even talk to me. I'm going to shout over you. I'm going to yell over you. When you start to say something that I don't agree with, I'm going to yell louder than you so that I don't have to hear your offensiveness. And so let's put this one on the screen. We don't grow out of offense. If you're offended all the time, you don't ever grow. You don't receive the blessing of God because you're not open to anything except what you already have in your hand. You're not open to any truth that's outside of what you already have in your hand. I have it all, and there's nothing you can do, and I'm going to hold on to this fence, and I'll hold on to my truths that are true, and they're true, and nobody's going to tell me it's not true, and I feel good about myself, and everything's perfect the way it is, and I don't want anybody to say anything. And somebody says something Elsa, well, that doesn't even make logical sense at all. I don't care. I don't care if it doesn't make logical sense. But, when I was a kid, there were a lot of things I didn't have to worry about today. I didn't have to worry. When I was 5, I didn't have to figure a lot of things out. I had to figure out how to wash my hands, right? That was a toughie, right? Had to figure that out. Had to figure out like how to go to sleep and not get in trouble at night, and I had to figure that out. But I didn't have to be burdened by the decision of whether I was a boy or not. My parents were geniuses. My mom, if you're watching, you're a genius. She probably is watching. Because you taught me something. I woke up, I looked down, she said, that means you're a boy. Yep. I was a boy. I was a boy. Nobody came to me in school and said, well, how do you feel, though? Do you feel? I was in the 3rd grade. Nobody came up to me and said, how do you feel about that? The fact that you called yourself a boy, that's offensive to the other kids, and the other kids are going to be upset, and we don't want them to be upset, right? The issue is I don't want anybody else to be mad. I don't want anybody to be upset. Now I'm upset because I'm trying to figure out if I'm a boy or a girl or not. And things that were obvious are now all of a sudden not obvious. It's like this was obvious. Like I didn't have to try to figure it. And then because the offended people are yelling so loud, and they're yelling so loud, you're like, boy, I don't even know what, you know what? I just don't even want to be involved. I don't like yelling, and we don't grow out of offense because the deeply offended don't mature because their pride in their own knowledge keeps them from seeking truth and growing from it. How do you keep from being offended all the time? Humble yourself a little bit and understand that you might not be right about everything. Understand that there's room to grow. That even as you get to be 49 or 59 or 69 or 79, there's still room to grow. Maybe there's some stuff I don't know. But I'm going to listen to everything, and then I'm going to make a decision based on common sense and the knowledge and the truth of God and decide what it is I believe. I'm not going to make a decision based on you being mad and yelling at me. I'm going to make decisions based on Jesus and my mommy. And my mommy. I went on a tangent. I'm sorry about that. Here's why this passage is alarming. We see an entire town whose unbelief amazes Jesus. And the question is, could that be us? Could that be us? It could be amazing. Look what it says in Mark 6:6. It says, he was amazed at their lack of faith. Not only that, look at what it says in verse 5. It says, he could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And so there are two things I see here that we have to, as a church and as believers, avoid at all costs. The very first thing we need to avoid at all costs is any kind of unbelief that amazes God. If we're here and God is amazed at how little we believe in him and how little we trust him and how little we listen to him because we're so smart and we've got it figured out. So, God, we're coming to this with open hearts. Open to you, to mold us and to change us. And I want you to know, God, that I'm not perfect. And I don't believe that I'm perfect. And I believe that there's a lot of things that I'm probably wrong about. If I didn't believe that way, then that means that I believe that I already know, and I'm not going to be open for you to change me. See, the thing about a person who is maturing is they're allowing God to change them. People that don't think they need to be changed don't change. We need to come to God and come to each other and come to things with this, God, change me. But I only want to be changed by you. I don't want to be changed by loud yelling people. I want to be changed by you. I want to be changed by your word. I want to be changed by the truth. And God, when I look at my life and it doesn't line up with what you're saying, when I'm watching the news and all of a sudden they're saying that my son, he doesn't have a sex. He's just like, it's like, well, I'm not going to believe that because, God, you're really clear. Right? You created man and woman, and you weren't trying to fool us and say, wow, let's try to figure out, let's mentally let's do some gymnastics, like all the kids went to synagogue and they all knew. I'm like, oh, hey, you're a boy. Oh, congratulations, Captain Obvious. So here are some important questions. Why couldn't Jesus do any miracles there? Why couldn't he do any miracles there? Number 2, are we in danger of not experiencing God's supernatural power in our midst? Number 3, can our unbelief trump God's power? So that because we have unbelief, can it trump God's power and now we handcuff God? Can that happen? No, that can't happen. And is the presence of disbelief a repellent to the move of God? Because that's what it feels like when you read the passage. It's like there's disbelief in the town, and now the miracles of God and the power of God is repelled and is not around. Isn't that kind of what it feels like? That would be a very kind of assemblage of God type view of things, but that's not really what's happening here. That's not what's happening. Why couldn't Jesus do miracles? I'm going to tell you why Jesus couldn't do any miracles at home. Are you ready? They wouldn't ask. You're like, that's a big letdown. Jesus didn't do miracles, and he did a couple, right? There were a few people, right? A couple people. Why did he heal them? Because they asked. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? They didn't ask. Why didn't they ask? Because they didn't need Jesus. They don't want Jesus. They already have it all figured out. They know it all. They've got 33 years of experience. They can rely on their own understanding. And so we're going to rely on our own understanding, and I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt that I could possibly be wrong about you. I'm going to stand strict. I'm offended by you. I'm not going to ask you to tell me anything. I'm not going to ask you to heal me because I'm offended by you because you're wrong and I'm right. Well, then you're not going to get blessed. You're not going to get blessed. Okay? You're not going to receive from God. It doesn't have anything to do with a spiritual atmosphere, right? It doesn't have anything to do with that. They just go to him and ask, right? They're unwilling to receive truth from Jesus because they already know him. We already know you. We already know everything there is to know about you, so. How about this? If you're unwilling to receive truth from Jesus, okay, then you're unwilling to receive anything else from Jesus. If I'm unwilling to receive truth from Jesus, that I might not have it all figured out and I might not be the genius that I think I am. If I'm unwilling to acknowledge that and say, God, I'm willing for you to tell me truth and I will change. If you're not willing to receive that from Jesus, then you're not going to be willing to accept other things from Jesus, blessings from Jesus, good things from Jesus. Right? He comes as a package. And so I'll close with this, and we're not going to have time to do a last song because I've gone over a little bit, but it's about acknowledging that I don't have God figured out. And in humility, asking God to come and move in a miraculous way in my life, in a way that I couldn't possibly fit God into a box. They all had Jesus in a box with a carpenter in it. They had Jesus in a box with a certain type of family that had some problems as far as the dad wasn't the father, and they've got him in a box, right? They're not willing to go outside of that box. And so it's about acknowledging that I don't have God figured out, and in humility, asking God to come and move in miraculous ways that I couldn't possibly fit God in. Let's just finish with this. Look at your own heart, okay? Look at your own heart. when I come to Jesus, where am I really at in my understanding and my feeling about how holy and spiritual and how mature I am, and my willingness to actually acknowledge that I might actually not have it all figured out. I have not gotten to the pinnacle of this unbroken upward spiral toward holiness. That you're not standing on the top of that saying, boy, everybody else is wrong. But saying, I could be. It's possible that I'm wrong. But I'm going to look for my answers from Jesus. And so I'm hearing a lot of shouting. I'm hearing a lot of things. That a lot of people are offended by stuff. I want to be in the conversation. But I'm going to hear, and I'm going to make a decision on this, knowing that I'm willing to change if God tells me. But I'm going to go to God and say, God, this is a struggle. There's a lot of people struggling with this issue. There's a lot of people struggling with this stuff. You've put me in this world. God, I don't think that way now. God, show me. And when I go to God, He makes it plain as day. He makes things very clear. And I go to other people and say, what do you think of this? It just seems like God is just very clear on this. Is that true? Well, yeah, it is true. Well, then why are these people yelling? They're all offended and they're mad. Right? Well, what does that mean? It means that they're offended and they're mad. It doesn't mean that they're right. It just means they're offended and they're mad. Okay. So it's okay for me to still believe. Absolutely, it's okay for you to believe this. You should believe this because this is the truth. This is what God said. Right? So go and think to yourself, where do I stand? Where do I stand? And do I want to grow? Right? Because that's what we have to do. We got to be growing. And growing involves us recognizing that there's room to grow. Okay? There's room to grow. God, I thank you for, man, I went over. Holy cow. God, sorry about that. God, I pray, though, that you would humble our hearts. God, that we would come at your word with a humble heart, expecting to learn something new about you, expecting to learn something that could transform us and change us. God, and it'll be uncomfortable for us to have to change our views on things. God, but that we would never change because people are loud, because people are offended, that we would change our views only when you draw us to yourself, and something that we're involved in our own life is an offense to you, God. And we change because you've convicted us of it. You've convicted and changed us. Said, that's sin in your life, Dustin. You need to not do that. You need to not be a part of that. You need to not promote that. God, challenge us and change us. Make us people that are more like you. And start with our hearts. Take our hearts of stone that are unwilling to listen. Turn them into hearts of flesh. Willing to be transformed and molded. In Jesus' name. Hey, again, sorry for the late exit, but that allowed for the baby to get a nap extra. So that's good. We'll see y'all.